The most hotly contested primary elections today are happening in the great state of Texas. All eyes are on the state's Senate race. On the Republican side, you got incumbent Senator John Cornyn. He's seeking to retain his seat against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Congressman Wesley Hunt. And over in the Democratic primary, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is facing off against State Representative James Tallarico.
CBS News correspondent Nidia Cavazos is in Dallas. Nidia, latest polling for the Republican race shows a very tight contest between Senator Cornyn and AG Paxton. Why might a Republican incumbent who supports President Trump potentially fall short today? This is, I think, a little bit surprising for folks watching.
Senator John Cornyn has been serving for over 4 terms, and that's the equivalent of 24 years. And as much as he's tried to position himself as a Trump ally and on the campaign trail, we've been hearing his message. He touts that he has voted with President Trump over 99.3% of the time. But to some voters in Texas, they say he's simply not conservative enough. Now, with his opponent, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, he's running to the right of Senator John Cornyn and simply says that he is not conservative enough and that the establishment has to go. Now, these are also sentiments that are echoed by the other GOP in the race here, Representative Wesley Hunt, who says John Cornyn has been in Congress for over 24 years, but the establishment simply has to go, and it is time for a fresh face here. So despite the fact that he is a Republican incumbent, he definitely has the experience. He's still stuck within this very competitive primary, so much that it is widely expected that tonight it will head off to a runoff. Now, if we base ourselves on what we're seeing on the ground, what the polls are saying, Ken Paxton has the lead here, but it's about determining if John Cornyn will make it out of this runoff. And if they do, we do see a runoff, then it's going to be 3 very intense months of competitive battle. We're going to start seeing even more money, and this is already one of the most expensive Senate races. So it's definitely going to be competitive, and we are expecting a runoff here tonight.
Also want to talk about the Democratic side of things. We're seeing a U.S. representative face very tough competition from a state representative, right? You would expect experience to win out here. So why are things so close between Crockett and Tallarico?
Kelly, this is yet another example of intra-party battles, and it truly goes to show the different types of factions within a single party. On one hand, Jasmine Crockett has been appealing to the progressive voters in Texas, and these progressives have been saying that they want a fighter. They want somebody who's truly going to stand up against Trump and the Trump administration. But on the other hand, you have James Tallarico, who has been telling his voters that if he is elected, he's willing to reach across the aisle, work with Republicans, and do whatever is necessary to help out his community. And we've seen a lot of his campaign messaging targeted toward Republicans who may not necessarily be satisfied with the administration and also trying to court the independents. But we're seeing that on one hand, Crockett is banking on the black vote so that they turn out for her, and Tallarico is banking on white and younger voters here. But we're also going to be watching tonight how Latinos end up voting, given their sizable population here in Texas. And if they break for Tallarico, then that sends a clear message that they're not looking for minority-oriented messaging here. Kelly, Vlad?
But let's talk about Latinos, Nidia. They make up roughly 40% of Texas's population. Earlier, the vice president of the Latino Vote Initiative for Unidos US said this in regards to what is driving their votes.
Right now, the president and his party own the economy. And in Texas, Hispanic primary voters, 40% of them say that they're worse off than they were a year ago. 40% say they've seen no difference. And so I think that's a big alarm bell for Republicans.
All right, so to what extent are today's elections in Texas impacted by the president's economic policies? And you know better than I do, Nidia, because you covered the campaign, that Latinos voted in greater numbers for President Trump in his second term than they did back in 2016. So what do you think is happening now?
Vlad, it always comes down to the economy because essentially voters vote with their wallets. And that's something that we keep hearing over and over again as I've been traveling across the state of Texas and going to different campaign events. Though there are other issues that are driving voters and they drove them to vote early, it comes down to the economy. And this goes for both conservative and the more liberal voters who we've spoken to, with some conservatives, for example, saying that while we do support what's going on with Israel and the U.S. and Israel strikes on Iran, they fear that this is going to be a distraction from bringing prices down. And again, immigration is one of those other issues that's also driving them to come out and vote. But it comes down to the economy. And we saw this in 2024, Vlad, as you mentioned.
Yeah. All right. Nidia Cavazos will be watching tonight. Thank you very much, Nidia, as always. Appreciate you.